it's Roz, and I'm here with a tag for Tag Tuesday for the first time in, feels like weeks. But this was a tag that I really couldn't miss because it really plays into kind of the Roz mind, because it is the Mookse and the Gripes bucket list book tag, which is a new original tag by Shawn. I think he came up with about a week ago, and the odd title is referring to a bookish podcast, and I'll put the details as instructed by Shawn in the show notes. But I'm not a podcast listener, so I haven't. Perhaps I probably should. But apparently, they did a podcast talking about their bucket list books. Books that they feel they really want to make sure that they read before they shuffle off this mortal coil. Maybe not anytime soon, maybe, but yeah, they don't want to die without having read these 10. And so the tag is very simple, because it's to give your 10 and then invite your watchers to pick 2 from that list that you need to commit to reading in next year. Why not? Sounds like fun. I am a very aspirational reader. Okay, I have an endless list of things that I either want to read or kind of feel that I ought to read or ought to have already read, probably. And I know that's silly, a bit, there's nothing that you don't have to read anything, do you? There aren't books that you have to read. But it's a combination of kind of intellectual curiosity and a bit of pride, I suppose. I don't like the idea of there being things out there that, other people have read and know about and I don't. Doesn't make any sense at all. Anyway, getting down to a list of 10 was a bit of a struggle. But I've tried, and what I've done is I've kind of grouped things a bit thematically. So, first grouping, I guess, is, now this is going to sound a bit pretentious, but kind of like what one might call foundational works of literature. Okay, you'll know what I mean when I say that one of them is the Iliad by Homer. Now, it's not that I haven't read any of the Iliad. I've actually read quite a bit of the Iliad, including a bit in the original Greek, back when I was, clever and could do stuff like that. But I've never actually read the whole thing cover to cover, partly because it's a bit long, and slightly intimidating, I suppose. But I've been doing really well lately with reading those big fat things that I feel I ought to have read and haven't. I'm halfway through the Divine Comedy by Dante at the moment, but that's thanks to Tom L.A. Books, of course. I finally read Gilgamesh this year, so yeah, I must get to the Iliad. Now, another of those sort of epic foundational works is the Shahnameh by Ferdowsi, and that's the 10th century Persian epic. Now, I may never read that cover to cover, but I would love to read kind of like an abridged version, like a good selection. That I bet there'll be a Penguin Classics one that I can turn to. So that would be filling a gap. Next theme section, I suppose, would be things that I've heard of so often that I kind of feel like I've read them, but I actually haven't. And I could probably talk about them as if I had, but actually I haven't. Good example of that would be Don Quixote by Cervantes. It's terrible not to have read that, but I haven't, so that's on that bucket list. Another would be, I've got it here, Tristram Shandy, or to give it its full title, The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy Gentleman by Lawrence Sterne. Now, this is a kind of both experimental and foundational, I guess, in the English novel. And I've read a bit of it, but never properly read the whole thing. And I would really like to, and I will one day. but it's just never quite been the day. Then, next section. Books by authors that I really, really love, but I haven't read enough by them yet. Okay, now this is kind of representational samples, I suppose, because there's quite a number of authors I could think of that I could put in this category. But I'm going to pick, for one, Daniel Deronda by George Eliot. Now, you might say, I'm sure I've heard you talk about lots of George Eliot books before, and it's true, but this is the kind of the only one of her major novels that I haven't yet read. But the thing is that my definition of how much George Eliot is enough George Eliot is every major thing that she wrote, I think, because she's such a fine writer. So this one's a fatty, but definitely on the bucket list. Another 19th century English author, British author, that kind of falls into the same kind of category, I guess, for me, is Anthony Trollope. Now, he wrote so much that I absolutely don't aspire to reading everything that he wrote, but I've never read any of his Palliser series. So number 6 on my bucket list is to read a Palliser novel by Anthony Trollope. Maybe The Eustace Diamonds, yeah, but in a sense it doesn't matter which, just one of them. Next theme. Okay, now if you know me, you will know that I read around the world quite energetically. I'm trying to read something by an author from every country, and I read a lot of work in translation, and it's my thing. And yet there are still really key leading authors from certain countries that I have never read, particularly kind of I might have read something contemporary and newly translated from that country, but older authors from the 19th or 20th century, say. An example of that would be the posthumous memoirs of Bras Cubas by Joaquim Maria Machado de Assis. So Assis is like the big 19th century Brazilian author, and that is his sort of number one best known book, and I've heard it's really good, but I haven't read it. So bucket list book. Another example would be the Egyptian writer Naguib Mahfouz. I've so many times I've heard, there's maybe 2 Egyptian authors you absolutely have to read, and one is Nawal El-Saadawi, and I've read quite a bit of her, and the other is Mahfouz, and I never have. So the first book of his Cairo trilogy, Palace Walk, that's on my bucket list. And then the final theme, last 2 books, okay, is books by influential women authors that I can't believe I haven't read. And I had to pick that as my final theme because I realised that an awful lot of the books I've picked up to now are by men. In fact, possibly all of them, apart from George Eliot. And that doesn't really represent my reading. So one is an English author, and that's Dorothy Richardson. Can't believe I haven't read her. She's like one of the early modernists. Her sequence of books, The Pilgrimage, was a huge influence on other 20th century, particularly British writers. The phrase stream of consciousness was coined about the first book in that sequence, Pointed Roofs, written in 1915. But I've never picked up anything by her, so that's on my bucket list. And then the other key characteristic of every author I've named so far is they're all dead. So I thought maybe I should have one living author on my bucket list 10. And this one is very much a kind of representative example rather than this specific author. I'm not explaining that very well. Another sort of bucket list thing for me, I guess, is reading contemporary and significant and exciting authors writing from other parts of the world from where I live, and whose works are, as they become available in translation. Okay, so my representative author for this is Adania Shibli, and she's a Palestinian author. She's young, well, young by my standards. She was born after I was, so 1974. So she's about 10 years younger than me. So yeah, obviously young. And my book I'm going to name for the bucket list is a minor detail, which is, I think she wrote in 2017 and came out in English in 2020. So there you go. That's my 10. Now, of course, the other thing we have to do is tag people, and Shawn tagged a huge list of booktubers, many of whom were people that I might have picked to tag. But I sat to think about it, and I realised that there were some people I would love to tag who weren't on his list. There's quite a few. I'm going to save them fast, but I'll put them all in the show notes. So, Christina of Knitting Books, etc. Yeah, what's your bucket list, Christina? Hannah of Hannah's Books, Katja of Read, Write, Create, and Sina of Beating Around the Books, Kelly of Books I'm Not Reading, Josna of Josna's Bookscapades, and Berna of Berna's Bookish Adventures. I think they might all have slightly different bucket lists to me, and then they're all women. So how about some men as well? Daniel of Guilty Feet, Tom of Tom LA Books, in honour of him getting me reading Dante, Alan of Big Hard Books and Classics, Jeremy Fee of Jeremy Fee, just Jeremy Fee. It's if you don't watch his channel, it's different, and another very different channel, Pay of Attention. Hope you enjoy coming up with your bucket list. Now then, the final thing is that you have to pick 2 for me to read, and if I'm feeling clever, I will work out how to do a Google survey or something and put that in the show notes. But if not, I will say that I haven't managed to do that and ask you to put it in the comments instead.